There are moments in life when the world goes silent, not because there's peace, but because something inside you has stopped believing. This is the story of Adam, a man who once had everything planned, a career he thought he wanted, a life he thought made sense, and yet, somewhere along the way he lost the map. He wasn't broken. He was just lost. Every morning felt the same. Wake up, scroll, shower, work, repeat. Days blurred into each other. And at night, as the city lights flickered outside his apartment window, Adam would stare into the distance, feeling an emptiness he couldn't name. He had friends, but no connection. He had achievements, but no joy. And deep down he wondered, is this it? Is this all there is? One evening, after a long, meaningless day, Adam found himself walking without direction. He didn't plan it. His feet just moved. The city noise faded as he wandered farther, past the crowds, past the glowing signs, until he reached an old bridge that overlooked the river. He leaned on the railing, staring at the dark water below, and whispered, "I don't even know who I am anymore." The sound of flowing water was the only reply. That's when he heard a voice behind him, gentle, calm, almost familiar. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Adam turned around. An old man stood there wearing a worn coat holding a small lantern. His face carried years of stories, eyes tired, yet filled with quiet light. Adam nodded weakly. "I guess it is. I just don't see much beauty in anything these days." The man smiled. "That's because you're trying to look for meaning with tired eyes." Adam frowned. "What do you mean?" The man walked closer, leaning on the railing beside him. "People get lost, son. Not because the world changes, but because they forget to look inside themselves. You can't find direction on a map when your compass is asleep." Adam stayed silent, unsure how to respond. The man continued, "Do you know what's funny? We spend half our lives climbing mountains that aren't even ours. And when we reach the top, we wonder why the view feels empty." Adam's throat tightened. That line hit deeper than he wanted to admit. He'd been chasing titles, approval, numbers, things that looked like success but felt like chains. After a moment, he asked quietly, "So what do I do now?" The man smiled faintly. "You stop running. You stop chasing. You stand still, long enough to hear what your soul's been trying to tell you." They stood there in silence, just listening to the night. The river kept flowing, calm, steady, endless. The city in the distance still shimmered, but it no longer felt like it owned him. After a while, Adam asked, "Have you ever been lost?" The old man laughed softly. "I still am sometimes. But I've learned that being lost isn't always a curse. It's just life's way of asking, are you ready to see differently?" He placed his hand gently on Adam's shoulder. "When everything around you loses meaning, it's not the end. It's an invitation to rebuild yourself, not from what you were told to be, but from what you truly are." Adam looked at the man, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. The man lifted his lantern slightly. "Light doesn't chase the dark, son. It just stands still and shines." Before Adam could reply, the man smiled again and started walking away across the bridge, the small light swaying with each step until it disappeared into the night. That night, Adam didn't go home right away. He sat by the riverbank, watching the water reflect the city's faint glow. And slowly something inside him began to shift. It wasn't clarity, not yet, but it was a start. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of being lost. He realized as maybe this confusion, this emptiness wasn't the end of his path. Maybe it was just the silence before a new beginning. He whispered to himself, maybe. I don't need to have it all figured out. Maybe I just need to listen. And for the first time in years, he felt peace. Not because he found answers, but because he finally stopped running from the questions. The next morning, Adam woke up before sunrise. Not because he planned to, but because something inside him felt lighter. He sat on the edge of his bed, watching the faint orange light peek through his curtains. For the first time in months, he didn't reach for his phone. He just sat, still, quiet, breathing. And in that silence, he remembered the old man's words. Light doesn't chase the dark. It just stands still and shines. Those words echoed in his mind like a forgotten melody. Adam decided to go for a walk, not toward the city this time, but away from it. He followed a small trail that led to the outskirts, where the noise faded and nature began. He noticed things he'd stopped seeing. The rustle of leaves, the chill of morning air, the sound of his own footsteps. Every step felt like he was returning to something he'd lost long ago. Not a place, but a part of himself. He found an old wooden bench by a lake and sat down, watching the ripples dance across the surface. It wasn't special. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. And maybe that's what he'd been missing. Reality, unfiltered by expectations or noise. A few days passed like this. Adam began walking every morning. He didn't plan what to think or where to go. He just showed up. Sometimes he'd bring a notebook. He started writing again, not for work, not for anyone, just thoughts, questions, feelings. And slowly the pages began to fill. He wrote, I don't know where I'm headed, but maybe that's okay. I want to stop surviving and start living. I miss being curious about life. Every word felt like a piece of his soul coming back home. One morning, as he sat by the lake, an old woman approached. She was carrying a basket of flowers, bright, colorful, full of life. She smiled warmly. You're here early every day. Thinking about something important? Adam chuckled. More like trying to stop thinking about everything. She laughed softly. Ah, that's the hardest thing to do, isn't it? We humans think too much, feel too little. Adam smiled faintly. Yeah, I guess I forgot how to feel. The woman sat beside him. You know, flowers don't worry about growing. They just do. Even after storms, they bloom again. Not because they're fearless, but because it's in their nature. Her words hit him like gentle truth. She continued, arranging the flowers in her basket. The world doesn't need you to be perfect, son. It just needs you to be alive. That day, Adam went home and looked around his small apartment. It felt different, not smaller, not emptier, just quieter. He cleaned, organized, threw away things that didn't matter anymore. It wasn't about minimalism. It was about letting go. Each drawer he emptied, each shelf he cleared. It was like removing layers of noise from his life. He found an old guitar he hadn't touched in years, covered in dust. He strummed a few chords, awkward, out of tune, But he smiled anyway, because for the first time in years, he wasn't doing something to achieve. He was doing it just to feel. Over the next weeks, Adam began noticing small details in his everyday life. The smile of the barista at the coffee shop, the laughter of children in the park, the way the sun hit the buildings at sunset. Life hadn't changed. He had. He began to realize something powerful. Maybe life isn't about finding yourself. Maybe it's about remembering yourself, piece by piece, moment by moment. One night, as he sat on his balcony watching the stars, he thought of the old man again. He wondered who he really was. A stranger? A teacher? Or maybe just a reflection of what Adam needed to hear at that moment. He whispered into the night, "Thank you, whoever you were." And then softly he smiled, because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't searching anymore. He was living. Adam didn't suddenly have his life figured out. He still had uncertainties, fears, and questions. But now they didn't scare him, because he'd learned something that changed everything. It's okay to not know where you're going, as long as you keep walking. Every small step, every honest moment, every quiet sunrise was leading him somewhere new. Not forward, not backward, but inward. As he closed his journal that night, he wrote one final line. "I may still be lost, but at least now I'm not afraid of the journey." He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and smiled. Because sometimes the most beautiful beginnings start right after you think you've reached the end. There's a moment in every person's journey when something quietly shifts. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you begin to see it differently. For Adam, that shift came slowly, like dawn breaking through a long, endless night. It had been 2 months since the night he met the old man on that bridge. And though he didn't fully realize it yet, something inside him had been growing, quietly, patiently, like roots beneath the soil. He woke up one morning and didn't feel that familiar heaviness pressing on his chest. There was still uncertainty, yes. Still questions, still fears, but now there was also a strange sense of peace, the kind that doesn't come from having answers, but from finally learning to stop running from the questions. That day, Adam went to a small cafe near his apartment, the same one he used to sit in months ago, feeling lost, scrolling endlessly through his phone. But this time, he brought nothing but a notebook and a pen. He ordered his coffee, sat near the window, and simply watched. People rushed by outside, chasing something invisible: deadlines, money, approval, validation. And he realized he used to be one of them. He smiled gently, not with arrogance, but with understanding, because he finally saw what he couldn't see back then, that sometimes the more you chase life, the faster it runs from you. A soft drizzle began outside. Raindrops trickled down the glass, blurring the world into shapes and colors. Adam watched them fall, remembering something the old woman by the lake had said. Flowers don't force themselves to bloom. They just do, he whispered under his breath. Maybe I'm still learning how to bloom. Later that week, Adam got a message from an old friend, Ethan, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. Ethan was struggling, lost in a high-paying job that felt empty, in a relationship that had lost its meaning. He wrote, "Man, I don't even know who I am anymore." Adam stared at the message for a long time. Those words, they were his words months ago. He remembered writing something similar in his own journal, and then, without overthinking it, he replied, "Maybe you don't need to figure it all out. Maybe you just need to take one small step, not to fix your life, but to remember it." Ethan responded, "You sound like some wise monk now." Adam laughed. "Trust me, I'm not. I'm just learning to listen." That night, Adam realized something profound. When you start healing, your light begins to guide others, even without trying. Not because you've become perfect, but because you've become real. A few days later, Adam went back to the bridge. He hadn't been there since that night. The city lights reflected off the river again, just like before. But everything felt different now. Not the world, but him. He stood there in silence, hands in pockets, remembering how broken he felt the last time he stood in that spot. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I'm not that man anymore." And deep inside, he knew it was true. He still had flaws, insecurities, doubts. But the man who once drowned in them had learned to breathe again. Over the next few weeks, Adam began volunteering at a community center near his neighborhood. He helped teach kids how to write, not essays, but stories. Stories about their dreams, fears, and hopes. He taught them that words have power, that sometimes writing about pain doesn't make it disappear, but it makes it understandable. One day, a little girl named Mia came up to him and said, "Mr. Adam, I don't like my story. It's sad." He smiled softly and replied, "Then keep writing, Mia. Sad stories don't have to end sad. They just have to be honest." Her eyes lit up, and she said, "Then I'll write until it gets happy." Adam laughed. "That's exactly what life is, Mia. We keep writing until it gets better." That night, as he walked home, the streetlights glowed like warm memories. The wind carried the faint smell of rain and soil, and for the first time, Adam didn't feel like he was just existing. He felt alive. He thought about all the moments he once tried to erase, the failures, the heartbreak, the loneliness. Now he saw them differently. Maybe those moments weren't mistakes. Maybe they were the cracks where the light got in. He realized something beautiful. You don't find peace by escaping pain. You find it by letting the pain teach you how to grow. The next morning, Adam wrote a letter. Not to anyone else, but to his past self. He wrote, "You were never broken, just buried. You thought you were lost, but you were only waiting to be found. Thank you for surviving the nights you thought would never end. Because without those nights, I wouldn't have learned how to see the dawn." He folded the letter carefully, placed it in a small box, and tucked it into his drawer. It wasn't closure. It was gratitude. Weeks turned into months. Adam's days were still ordinary. He worked, cooked, met friends, and laughed. But underneath it all, there was something new, a quiet sense of purpose that didn't depend on success or validation. He didn't need to chase meaning anymore. He had learned that meaning comes when you stop forcing life to make sense. And one evening, As he watched the sunset from his window, he finally understood what the old man on the bridge had meant that night. The man wasn't trying to give him advice. He was showing him something, that sometimes the answers we seek aren't out there in the world. They're hidden in the silence within us. Adam took a deep breath, whispering softly, "Maybe being lost isn't the opposite of being found. Maybe it's just part of the way." And in that moment, something inside him felt whole. Not perfect, not complete, just whole enough to keep walking. He realized that peace doesn't mean everything around you is calm. It means you've learned to stay calm no matter what's around you. That night, he wrote one final entry in his journal. "There will be days when I'll lose my way again. But now I know, every time I feel lost, it's just life calling me home to myself." He looked out the window once more. The city lights shimmered like distant stars, and he smiled, because he finally understood that the journey wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about remembering who he was all along. It had been nearly a year since that night on the bridge, the night Adam met a stranger who unknowingly lit a spark inside him. A year since the moment his life quietly began to turn, not with a grand revelation, but with a whisper that said, "You can begin again." Now, Adam stood at the edge of a hill just outside the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. The world below him buzzed with motion, cars, people, endless noise, and yet up here, it was silent. That silence felt like home. Adam had changed, not dramatically, not overnight, but in ways that truly mattered. He no longer lived his days chasing approval or running from emptiness. He lived them with awareness. He'd learned to appreciate the slow mornings, the conversations that mattered, the simple acts of kindness that cost nothing. He had started his own small writing blog, not for fame or money, but as a space where people could share their stories, their pain, their rediscovery. And every time someone wrote back, "Your words helped me," he smiled quietly, not because he felt proud, but because he finally understood what purpose really meant. It wasn't about being successful. It was about being useful. One afternoon, Adam got a message from a reader named Claire. She wrote, "I've been lost for years. I don't even know where to begin." He thought for a moment, smiled softly, and replied, "You've already begun, the moment you said you were lost." Because he had learned something beautiful. Acknowledging your pain doesn't make you weak. It's the first step toward finding your strength. That evening, he went for his usual walk to the lake, the same one where he used to sit in silence months ago. The old woman with the flowers wasn't there anymore, but the memory of her words lived on in his mind. The world doesn't need you to be perfect. It just needs you to be alive. He sat down, looked at the reflection of the sky on the water, and whispered, "I am alive." And for the first time, he didn't just say it. He felt it. A soft breeze blew across the lake. In that moment, he realized something profound. Peace isn't something you find once and keep forever. It's something you choose again and again, every single day, and every time life pulls you off balance, you return to that stillness within. Not because you're unshaken, but because you've learned how to find your center again. A few weeks later, Adam was invited to speak at a small community event. He didn't consider himself a speaker, but he agreed anyway, not to impress anyone, but to share what he wished someone had told him long ago. He stood in front of a small group of people, students, workers, mothers, strangers, faces that looked tired, uncertain, searching, just like his had once been. He took a deep breath and began, "You know, there was a time I thought my life had no direction. I tried everything, working harder, pretending to be happy, numbing the silence. But none of it worked. Because the truth is you can't outrun yourself." The audience listened in silence. Adam continued, his voice calm, sincere. "The day I stopped chasing happiness was the day I started finding peace. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to keep showing up, especially when you don't feel like it." He paused, looking around the room. "You see, we spend so much of our lives waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right feeling. But life doesn't wait. It moves, whether you're ready or not. So stop waiting to feel ready. Start with what you have, where you are." There was a long, heavy silence. And then, applause. Not thunderous, but heartfelt. Adam smiled. Not because he felt like a hero, but because he realized that the words he once needed to hear had finally become the words he could give to others. After the event, as the room emptied, a young man approached him. He looked nervous, eyes tired, voice trembling. He said, "Your story, it's mine too. I thought I was the only one who felt this way." Adam placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "You're never the only one. You're just the first one brave enough to speak." The young man nodded, tears in his eyes. And in that simple exchange, Adam understood something he would never forget. When you heal yourself, you quietly give others permission to heal too. That night, Adam walked home beneath the stars. The streets were empty, the world asleep. But inside, he felt more awake than ever. He thought of everything he had lost, and everything he had gained because of it. He whispered to himself, "If getting lost was the price I had to pay to find myself, then it was worth it." And for the first time in his life, those words didn't sound poetic. They sounded true. The next morning, he went back to the bridge, the same place where the story began, the same place where a lost man once stood in silence, ready to give up. The river still flowed beneath, calm and endless, and for a moment, Adam imagined the old man standing there again, smiling, as if to say, "You made it." He closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you for showing me that even in the dark there's always light." And then softly he smiled to himself, because now he knew the bridge was never just a place. It was a moment. A crossing, a reminder that life isn't about avoiding pain. It's about learning to carry it with grace. As he turned to leave, the morning sun broke over the horizon, golden, warm, unstoppable. And the light touched his face like a quiet blessing. He felt it deep in his soul, not the end of a story, but the beginning of a new chapter. Because that's what healing truly is. It's not becoming someone new. It's coming home. to yourself. Final voiceover lines, closing wisdom. So, if you ever feel lost, don't be afraid. It doesn't mean your story is over. It means your story is unfolding. Keep walking. Keep breathing. Keep showing up, even when it hurts, because one day you'll look back and realize the path that once felt confusing was actually leading you home all along. Soft, cinematic music swells, and as the screen fades to black, a final quote appears. Sometimes you must lose sight of who you were to discover who you were always meant to be. Adam.